Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 11 of our weekly Q&A videos. We don't always mention this anymore because it doesn't seem like it draws a lot of people anyways, but this feels like a good time to mention that unless we forget, which every once in a while we do, this is also uploaded on a bunch of major podcasting platforms. And you can check those out in the links in the description if you are currently on our YouTube channel and you want to be able to, for example, download it on the go, or if you want to be able to play it in the background while you're actually playing the game itself on the same device.
Or you want to hear the special Origin episode that was the only one that's totally a podcast and not associated with video.
Yeah, that's true. About an hour and 5 minutes, I think, of exclusive content there at the beginning of the feed. So you can check out the links in the description for all of those. But anyways, getting into, I don't even know, we did the Origin episode just because we were kind of excited about seeing who would listen to the podcast. It's not like there's any money in the podcast.
Oh, there's zero money.
So
there's less money, as little money as there is in the YouTube channel,
which is literally zero.
There's literally zero in the podcast.
But yeah, we've got that, I guess, if anybody wants an extra hour of us just talking about ourselves mostly for that one. I don't think we did like questions the same way.
No, but I think we were at a stage in our, I don't want to really say career because it doesn't feel like a career, because to me a career means there's more of a livelihood involved.
So when I took civics and careers, what they said like a job was the thing that you did for money, and it was one thing at a time. So you could have a job or a set of jobs, but it was only ever that sort of individual part.
Okay.
And a career was the sum total of everything that you've done, including anything that's built skills or anything like that.
Oh, okay. So maybe it is part
so
of our...
when you talk about something as a career, your career is basically everything that you've done.
Yeah, to me, a career is more like a subset of the job that involves... Sorry, no, jobs are a subset of a career.
Mm-hmm. And
that a career really almost requires you to have aspects of a job. And if you can say it's the sum total of your life, but if it doesn't actually have a sort of a direct connection to something where you can actually make a livelihood from
like
it,
skill building,
then it doesn't. Yeah, but it should be skills that actually apply to your livelihood.
But this is it's not our livelihood the same way, but we get ad revenue from it, so I think that counts as a career.
I guess so. Okay, fair enough. So what else were?
Well, we have questions. So I think we were just chatting before the questions. I don't know if there's anything.
This is our banter at the beginning.
Yeah, like the beginning of a Taskmaster episode.
Okay, so yeah. Oh, by the way, I loved watching the Taskmaster series. I missed a whole bunch of, I watched it all out of sequence. Yeah. And I find that as I'm watching it again to try to figure out which ones I've missed, that I'm still as amused by the ones I've already seen.
Yeah.
And I'm just really watching the whole thing.
We must have talked about Taskmaster before, but if we haven't, Taskmaster is a British game show hosted by Alex Horne and Greg Davies, where they have weird, out-of-the-box, sort of borderline absurdist sometimes challenges that they have a set of comedians do. And then Greg gets to assign them points, basically arbitrarily. And some stuff... if it's like do it the fastest, obviously the fastest person gets it, but basically whenever it's ambiguous, Greg just gets to sign stuff out as a Taskmaster, and it is tons of fun. It is super cool. It is available universally. It's available worldwide on YouTube, and I think there's a bunch of seasons. There's not every season, but there's a lot of seasons that are free in their entirety on YouTube, including a week-by-week airing of the new seasons as they come out. The new season, season 10. So it's a great show. It's a ton of fun. We have the Taskmaster book. We absolutely adore it. If you want something funny and light, Taskmaster is really good for that.
Well, we were talking about this just the other day, about why it's got such broad appeal. And one of the things is that it hits so many different genres of shows. So one, it's a game show. Mm-hmm. That's the easy part. Two, it's a bit of a comedy, sort of like improv.
Yeah.
Because you've got a bunch of comedians doing it.
The tasks themselves are almost like improv.
They can be. Well, see, that's just it too, right? So it becomes a little bit almost like there's the aspect of it being a reality show.
Yeah.
But even embedded in it, because of the way they've structured it, it's also... a reaction.
Yeah, like a reaction channel, except it's like a director's commentary / reaction channel where there's people who are talking about the stuff that they did, and then people like laughing at them and sort of bouncing off it. So it's almost like a built-in reaction channel in its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it does each. I mean, I always find it funny too when people say, well, it does this, this, and this. It's the implied part is that it does all of those aspects really well.
Yeah.
So it scratches all those itches at once. It's really funny. You get to, there's a lot of individual characters. So it's more than, you know how sometimes they have...
You get to know the guests.
Yeah, more so because you watch other game shows where they have to make a specific effort to draw out the personalities of the competitors.
Yeah, like if you're watching Wipeout, or if you're watching like the show that I'm watching right now is Nailed It, where you can tell they really have them ham it up a little bit.
Right.
Where they have to, like, if there's something weird about them, they really have to play up that weirdness, and that's sort of how they pull you in quick, so that you can, you know, come in, come out, and get an instant sort of sense of a person.
This is better because these are the same contestants over an entire season, and the tasks themselves and the way their reaction part of it really lets you know who they are.
Yeah.
And you end up being able to cheer for a lot of the contestants.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that the tone that they strike is really good, where some people are a little bit more competitive than others, some people are less competitive, but it's very rare. I think there's only one person that I can remember specifically not really being a fan of by the end of a season.
Right.
There's sometimes I don't care about people, sometimes I'm kind of neutral on them.
Right.
But I very rarely come out of the show, like each season has 5 new contestants, and most of the time I come out of it with 5 people who I'd be excited to see in another piece of media when they pop up. He's like, oh, there they are.
Right.
Yeah. So it's tons of fun. Yep. Hours and hours of entertainment. Yeah, so that's our Taskmaster plug. We also have questions sometimes.
Yes.
So we'll maybe do one of those. So our first question comes from Android, but with a capital N. And they say, here's a challenge. Can you try to get the bleed damage over time, and then in brackets nasty scratch, of Ame-Comi Catwoman to stack on a multiplayer opponent 3 times? Here's some notes from my testing. The highest I could stack is 2. Nasty Scratch refers to both the bleed and power drain. This is why Quake Engine would not extend the period of each Nasty Scratch. The bleed would be reapplied, but the power drain would not. The first Nasty Scratch lasts 12 seconds. The next stack does not reset the timer, so the next 2 stacks must be applied within this period.
It's definitely an interesting question. We thought about it in the abstract, and I think the quick conclusion we came to is because it's not worth it. Because it relies on triggering a combo ender, which you can't do most of the time. It triggers probably about half the time we do a tap combo. Yeah. And if your opponent blocks, clearly you're not even going to get to start your combo. Mm-hmm. Then with the time limit, it means, so let's say you're able to successfully stack 3 nasty scratches. You'll have at best, like a couple seconds left at the end of it to enjoy a triple stack. Yeah. A triple, it's not a double burger, it's a triple decker.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a term for a triple burger.
Because there's double, like a Big Mac, like it's a triple Mac. I don't know, there's no buy. Oh, actually there is, Trig Mac, instead of a Big Mac. Get it?
I don't know about that. Did you hear about, where was it? There's a country, I think it might have been Australia or something, where McDonald's tried to sue somebody or take legal action for somebody for the use of Big Mac. Right. For the name of their burger. And they lost. I forget what the exact thing was. But so, in that country, McDonald's actually lost, trademark rights for the Big Mac. So, Burger King had, Big Mac burgers are, not a Big Mac, on their menu, and people were able to market their stuff as Big Macs in that country.
That's interesting.
It's pretty funny.
All right, I guess
we'd have to look that up.
We'll look that up for next time. So the benefit is not enough. I mean, I guess in theory, if you could stack 3 bleeds on just the combo ender, mm-hmm. you generate enough power that you could do a special on top of that. Can you imagine how fast it would bleed? But you know what? Stacking extra bleeds like that, you can get the same effect by pretty much any character that does bleed on special 1. Yeah. Have them have 2 bars of power and give them Enchantress companion gear. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you do the first one, you do the second special one, while the skulls are flying at them, you get a bunch of bleed stacked. I mean, again, you don't get the benefit of the power drain, but I think the effort it would take to really sort of prove a point and have no practical application, because you'd have to do it so many times, the opponent would not be able to block. I guess if you were going to have the best success, it would have to be, say, wearing Astro Harness, where you don't do anything and you wait until they start swinging, so you can definitely hit them in the middle of their combo.
Yeah.
But even then, I think the invulnerability doesn't last long enough.
And it's luck too.
Yeah.
It's so luck.
So it's so much work. I mean, if I was going to do research or even do a video on something that involved a bit of luck, I would be more tempted to try to do another run through, say, Survivor, because it sounds like, from what I've heard, the way people have who've been making more of an effort is that there's some levels that are literally impossible to beat. Like, it's just set up in a way that you can't win unless the character or gear combination on them is different than the ones that are totally impossible. Yeah, so appreciate the idea. It's a good in theory, but I think the counter theory is enough to make me not even want to try it, because I think
for how hard it would be. So we probably can't.
Yeah, good thought though. Yeah, I think it's not possible.
So we have our next question from Drake Pendragon, and they say...
Oh, can I point out something first?
Go ahead.
Sorry. This is a really old question, and it was one of those weeks where we ran out of time, but I felt like it was worth bringing back up again. And what's interesting to me is I went back looking for it in the channel comments, and all of Drake Pendragon's comments are gone. They've disappeared.
Huh.
And I don't know what happened to that. So, I mean, I cut and pasted it from before. Yeah. So that's why I had to go digging around to pull it up, and that's why it's quite a few weeks removed from when they originally asked the question.
Okay. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yep, so we've got this comment, and it says, what is funny is that when President Trump shut down travel from China because of the virus, Biden and Nancy Pelosi insulted him and told people to go to Chinatown.
All right, so this is interesting. This kind of statement is really interesting to me because on the face of it, they seem so reasonable. Right? So it's definitely got the appearance of being reasonable. You can say, well, Trump did something that was helpful. He was criticized at the time for doing something that was good. And as the pandemic developed, this was sort of a weaker version of something that I think a lot of countries are adopting.
Yeah. That
should have been, if he got criticized for doing this as being too much, that he should have just done more of it, and that would have been the right thing. So in retrospect, this was really good. And that the Democrats did something really stupid, right? Because at the time before the pandemic was really big, they said go to Chinatown. And again, on the face of it, it seems like that would have been a really dangerous thing to do.
telling people to go out and do stuff.
Right. So I guess the reason why something like this is so pernicious, I think, all right, so part of it, you have to sort of look a little bit more closely at what actually happened, because I know that sometimes our memories are maybe not nearly as accurate as they seem at first blush. So one of the things was that Trump didn't actually shut down travel from China, right? If he just instituted a ban, I think that would have been actually a lot less racist.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. It seems reasonable because it's, people are accusing him of being racist. If anything, he should have done more. So I went back and found on Fact Check and a New York Times article, right? So the travel restrictions on January 31st policy prohibits non-U.S. citizens other than the immediate family of U.S. citizens and permanent residents who have traveled to China within the last 2 weeks from entering the U.S. And the other article was on January 31st, President Trump barred foreign nationals from entering the country if they'd been in China, the site of the virus's first known outbreak during the previous 2 weeks. So, yeah, infections don't work like that. It's not just the non-U.S. citizens coming out of China that can potentially be infectious. It's everybody. So when you
I do understand sort of having to let U.S. citizens back, they should still have that same 2-week restriction somehow.
Right. So the key then is that you don't let people in general. Because they're U.S. citizens, they have a right to come back. But then you have to take precautions for the people coming back to restrict their ability to infect other people. So I mean, part of why it seems so reasonable is the way, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID-19, has been characterized, right? So, did it start in China? Yes. Well, probably. I'll say, for the sake of this discussion, we'll say yes.
It seems likely.
Right. Did it have anything to do with Americans or Canadians who are racially Chinese? No.
Yeah.
COVID-19 didn't start in Canada. Cases had to come in. So the great majority of the cases actually came from, we've been infected mostly from USA.
Yeah.
And then Italy, I think, and European countries are second. But we don't call it the American virus, even though they're the ones that were the initial, is it trigger? Not trigger.
Transmission vector?
Yeah, they were the biggest cause of the number of current cases that weren't locally transmitted.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it, that a lot of the cases actually in Europe and I think in the United States came from originally from Europe. So we're looking at Italy as being sort of the epicenter for it, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody was saying, don't have pizza, don't eat in an Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
Because there isn't that same kind of assumption that everybody who is ethnically, not even Chinese, ethnically Southeast Asian.
Yeah.
Right? Vietnamese, Japanese, all those countries where people come from that when you're white, you can't be asked to figure out the difference.
Yeah.
So
what the wrong type of person would call Orientals.
Yes. And just in case you weren't sure if you're listening to this, Orientals should not refer to people. It can refer to foods. It can refer to objects, but not people.
Yeah.
When you talk about people like that, that's when it gets racist. All right. Mm-hmm. So there's people saying, don't go to Chinese restaurants. Don't go to Chinatown.
Yeah, so that statement wasn't like, you should be going out more than you are. You shouldn't make an effort to go to Chinatown. It was more... I
don't even think it's that bad. Like, if at the time, when they didn't have a good idea of the scope of the pandemic...
Yeah.
I think it was wrong in retrospect, but I don't think it was entirely reasonable when they were trying to encourage business the same way
support Chinese businesses, and go to Chinatown is basically just saying, don't stop going to places owned by Chinese people just because they're Chinese.
Right. Because there were people that were assaulting anybody who looked Asian. Mm-hmm. People who were Asian, so who were Korean, Japanese, Vietnamese, Chinese, Malay, Filipino.
Which is kind of ridiculous, because if you're worried about them being a transmission vector for disease, like, beating them up is a great way of really getting up into their space and getting a lot of their
fluids.
A lot of their fluids, yeah, like much more than you normally get for any other sort of non-intimate or familiar act.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, beating somebody up is probably one of the worst things you can do to a stranger to get sick from them.
Yeah.
But clearly that's not what it's about. This is something that's interesting, because I'm taking my prejudice class.
Right.
So there's sort of two main ways that there's two models right now that are the two main ways that we conceptualize how prejudice forms. And they're not like universally accepted, but they have a lot of evidence to support them as two of the ways that we're prejudiced towards other people. And so one of them is like perception of credible threat, where you think that people are dangerous to you. Mm-hmm. And the other one is what's called the behavioral immune system, which is disease avoidance and the perception of people who are less healthy. So
is that just an aspect of it? Like, one is a subgroup of the other, right? Because that's one type of threat.
Not exactly. So what they are is they're based around actually like evolutionary theory, and then they've been like tested. So the perception of credible threat is like physical violence specifically.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, they're
because the way it's phrased, it feels like to me like both are threats, right?
Yeah, no, they both are threats to like evolutionary sense threats, but because they're based on evolutionary models, so they're distinct. Right. And so, not important for what we're talking about here, but one thing that's interesting actually is that a lot of the ways that people who research stereotypes and prejudice look at it, they look at a two-axis model for it, where one axis is competence and the other is warmth. Those are called like the ambivalent model, and so we tend to feel like in groups are high competence and high warmth. So we're people are smart and people are also capable, and a lot of other groups tend to get high values for one and low of the other. So like Jewish people and Chinese people are traditionally stereotyped as high competence but low warmth, and that justifies derogating them. And competing actively against them and being jealous of them. Because when a minority group is successful, that's how they're shown. And a lot of other minority groups are stereotyped as being low competence, high warmth. So we look at like mental illness. A lot of other races of people are stereotyped as low competence, low competence, high warmth, where they're like, oh, they're very nice. They're just not.
But.
Yeah, but. And
there's always a but.
The theory for that, and it's been, borne out by research as much as research can bear anything out, is that it makes people less likely to contest the natural order because it's sort of giving people a balancing effect. And so the ambivalent stereotypes are actually really important for maintaining stuff. It's that idea of rich but unhappy and like poor but happy, or like beautiful but dumb. Or like ugly but smart, where when there's when you
fat and jolly.
Yeah, when you feel like there's a balance of things, when you feel like there's
a fairness that tips the scales one way, so you get more of one, you get less of the other.
Yeah, and it makes people feel like, well, I don't need to fight for my perception of being dumb, right? Because people who are, or maybe you go like dumb but happy and smart but unhappy, where they feel like there's a natural sort of balance and everybody has their own sort of role and nobody has anything perfect. That's okay, so then what? So if somebody, I guess it's the idea of, like in situations where you're completely backed in corner, you've got nothing to lose. In those situations, you're not part of the in-group, but you actually do have something to lose because if you push back a little bit, they can say you're nothing. Right. Okay, That's interesting. And so that's why when you think of stereotypes, there's very few stereotypes that are actually fully just like these people are terrible people. Right. And another thing that's really interesting, so this is for credible threat theory, which is when people feel threatened by a minority group, or a member of an outgroup, they actually feel like they are more competent, and they are measured higher on measures of competence other than stuff directly relevant to being threatened. So when you think somebody's going to come hurt you, you start to perceive them as more capable of doing the things they set out to do. Right. So that's one thing that's interesting. And I guess it also justifies your fear when you think that that's a much more credible threat. Okay. So that's one type of thing. But what we're talking about here is people beating up East Asian people, right? Right. And so that's the idea of disgust being the underlying factor for a type of prejudice. And so the idea is that disgust and the expression of disgust was initially to prevent us from being poisoned by stuff. So you wouldn't eat bad food. You wouldn't get sick. Not just poisoned, I guess, contaminated. Even before the germ theory of disease, that kind of instinct would actually serve a purpose of preventing infection. And when you're disgusted, what do? You scrunch up your nose, you squint your eyes, you like purse your lips. Oh, you close off your orifices. Yeah. Okay, you close off the vectors for getting sick, right? So they looked at portals. They looked at the expression of disgust and they say, you clench your palm. Yeah, and you leave. You get away from something. Right. Okay. And then you don't let pathogens in. So people are like, well, the disgust seems like it's queued up to make you prevent yourself from getting sick. And so the disgust theory basically is the idea that outgroups carry diseases. If you think about like colonization, right? Like the Europeans? Yeah, Europeans giving smallpox, were getting everybody sick. They were. They came and stole their land, made them sick, and killed them off. Yeah. And so you sort of put those two together and you go, so if we feel disgust at outgroups, that might be a natural mechanism to keep us separated from them enough that we're not getting whatever pathogens they spread. And anything that is considered unhealthy does that. And so they've tested this in a variety of ways. One of the ways they test it is if you show people gross pictures, if you show people pictures of rotten food, like North American people, and then you ask them about how they feel about immigration, they will feel more negatively towards immigration from places like Africa and places that they perceive to be culturally dissimilar to us. Right. But they will have the same opinion as they did before for places like Ireland or places like white European countries, which are perceived to be culturally similar, because the practices feel the same. The types of people feel the same, so they don't feel like there's a...
So they associate their disgust. So that disgust enhances what more disgustedness. Disgust is its own word. Yeah. Disgust is a noun. Never mind. So interesting. All right, so that's cool.
So for coronavirus, and another thing that they found actually is that people who are more easily disgusted tend to have more prejudice of this type.
Wow.
So people who are more easily disgusted tend to have more politically conservative views and more conservative views on immigration. So there's actually a correlation with how easily disgusted you are and how conservative you are.
Okay, that's like a stereotype for white bread.
Yeah.
So the more white bread you are, the white... Oh, wow. Okay, that's really interesting.
And they've done a bunch of things. They found that like your opinion on like gay marriage also changes when you were exposed to discussing stuff. And this was a while ago, so it might be different now when it's a lot more commonly accepted.
Right.
But it'll depend on who you're testing now. But yeah, they found if you disgusted somebody, they'd be less willing to accept gay marriage. And that is a vector, which they had theorized and at least partially tested, is why we feel gross towards people with different practices than us. So that's cultural practices, but also like, gay people, right? For straight people feel more grossed out by what gay people are doing.
Right.
On some level. But that's also where fat phobia comes from.
Right.
And discrimination against elderly people and people with visible physical disability.
Right.
Is based off of the perception of less cleanliness.
Right.
Or a chance of giving you whatever they got.
Right, infectivity, contagiousness.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the people who were beating up people in the street because of COVID were probably also more easily disgusted people just in general. And that's probably the underlying mechanism. And so it's the idea that they perceived Chinese people or East Asian people because all those people can't tell because they're not very visually discriminative between those races were triggering their sort of behavioral immune system.
See, and I had looked at it a little differently as being just that it was a logical fallacy where the jump that they made was associating stuff that came from a country with people who came from a country but came by such a different route that had been here for generations, had not been actually anywhere near what was happening, but because they were making that jump of that association is what was the underlying error in logic was the racist part.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, we can't speak to any individuals, right? So there's some people who might just have that underlying error in logic, but in terms of what the underlying psychological mechanisms were for that, or maybe some of them were thinking about it, but for the kind of stupid behavior that they were doing, right? Like going and beating up people in the streets is just undeniably really dumb, ignorant behavior.
Right.
Maybe they weren't thinking about it a lot, and maybe they just had this sort of gut feeling, and this is where it was coming from, and there was no second thought there, right?
Right.
So that's another potential perspective on that.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
It is. I just had a couple notes of something that I wanted to wrap up this question with was that, so for the people who were thinking that, Trump did a good thing, just some counterexamples of something similar that was done, but actually...
It was a step in the right direction.
It was, but it was the step parts that were missing. The reason why parts that were missing was sort of the racism.
Yeah.
So Atlantic Canada, because we're Canadian, if it's not obvious to you, I mean, we've talked about a bunch. We are Canadian. This is closer to our hearts. The Atlantic Canada bubble was really interesting where they were able to keep as many cases out of the provinces as possible. And they were so effective at it that some of the Atlantic provinces that were able to do it were able to group together and say, hey, you guys are doing such a good job. We're doing such a good job.
Yeah, because there's just no COVID here.
Yeah, we can let our people travel in between us provinces, whatever.
Our provinces?
And they were, our it was just, it was right in front of me. I should have had that.
Yeah. It's okay. Article use is hard.
And then when cases started popping in one provinces, you know what they did?
They said, bye, you're done.
Said, yeah, they said that was it. And we have some actually concrete examples of how effectively it was done because a friend of ours went back to New Brunswick from outside Canada through Toronto and the amount of follow-up with Toronto was when they landed was 0, even though they had to spend a couple days before they had their connecting flight to New Brunswick.
Yeah, they basically just said, come on in. You don't have COVID? Okay, we trust you.
And then in New Brunswick, they had to be quarantined. They had to actually make arrangements, and public health was actually following up with them.
Yeah, like the police checked on them to make sure that they were home.
Right.
Yeah.
Another counterexample was a friend who lives in Grand Cayman, so also known as Cayman Islands. And when people come in, so Cayman Islands actually they had some cases, they were very effective in shutting their borders down to everybody and got their cases effectively down to 0. And anybody that had cases, they knew them as soon as they came in, right? So when anybody traveling, once they opened the borders to travelers, they actually had people put on a wristband with a GPS tracker on them that was not supposed to be not removable. You couldn't leave their house for 14 days because the tracker on the device had to stay close to your phone. The phone, actually, technically it was the device on your watch was linked to your phone. Your phone was the GPS tracked, and if you went too far away from your phone, or your phone got too far away from your house, they would be alerted. And there was apparently a couple who used a lot of really greasy whatever stuff on their wrists, were able to slip it off, and they were caught, and they were fined, and the government realized that their $1,000 fine was not enough, so after that they bumped it up to $10,000. And then they revoked their visa, even though they own property there, and booted them out. See, that's the way you do it. If you're going to do it, you have to be a little bit more strict. And
it's hard to go do half measures.
Yeah, because it ends up really, like, it's like what we're watching now, right? Yeah. Where if you do sort of part of it and not enough to be effective, then everybody's peeved at you because you're still getting a bunch of cases, but then you have to suffer through the restrictions.
Yeah, like obviously we couldn't grind the whole country to a halt for 2 weeks. But theoretically, if you were to grind the country to the halt for 2 weeks and then not let anybody new in without good measures, you could burn COVID out of a country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so people did variations of that or the closest version of that, and you can do other stuff when you don't have so many people sick. And the more people you have sick, the worse measures get. I saw something that was actually really interesting looking at like batch testing.
Okay.
Which was basically using like mixing people's samples because it's so sensitive.
Right, so you test a bunch of samples at once? Together, like you mix them up.
But you do like grids or like 3D arrangements where you have basically the combination is so that if people test positive, based off of the combination of samples that all test positive together, even if you have a couple people positive that you're testing out of like a group of 100 that you're batch testing, there's only one combination of people who are sick that would result in all of those coming back.
It's sort of like a variation on that scale
Einstein
problem
puzzle.
Where you... What?
Oh, no, never mind.
Oh, okay. No, where you've got a number of coins and you get to use a scale a limited number of times. And using that scale a limited number of times, you got to figure out which one's the fake one that doesn't weigh the same as the others.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have to weigh each individual one.
It's just a search system.
Right.
And so one of the things is that you can make, if you do this, and if your cases are, there's different percentages where it becomes more and more efficient. Because if for every type of testing, it only works up to a certain number of positive cases per test.
Right.
So no matter how you do it, once you do the math, you can, if like only 3% of your tests are coming back positive, you can do something that I think increases your efficiency tenfold. So if you test it in the right order and you do it right, you can test 10 times as many people as you're using tests instead of one each. But the second it hits over a certain percentage, that strategy doesn't work anymore. And the higher and higher percentage of the population that you're testing actually makes it less and less efficient. So if you have, one of the things that you were talking about, I forget, I think it was like 10 billion a year or something to test every single person in the US, like every month. And so if it's under a certain percentage, you can actually test your entire population and you can test them regularly with like a much lower number of tests. Right. But the second you hit over a certain percentage, those strategies stop working. And it's the same with all the legislation and stuff, where the strategies are a lot better the less people are sick, and the more people are sick, stuff just stops working. Certain strategies just aren't practical anymore.
From a math point of view, that really makes sense, because the smaller the number that you have, the more likely it is that any given test that you do with a bunch of people mixed in is going to be negative, and you're going to be able to eliminate a whole lot of the cases saying those are not.
Yeah, if you're testing, like, if you're mixing everybody's test into 5 different things that you're pulling back,
right,
and only one person is sick, well, then those 5 will come back positive, and there's only one possible combination of people that could produce that result. But if half of them are sick, then you can imagine that they're muddled up, and there's possibilities where any combination of the tests could be coming back positive, and it's not useful at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a sidetrack, but
I think that was the main track. It's interesting. And what you mentioned, actually, that 2 weeks of shutting everything down to burn out COVID was not practical. I mean, in retrospect, though, when you look at the impact on everybody, the closer we could have gotten to trying to stop everything for 2 weeks would have been maybe less painful than the slow burn that we've had.
Oh, I think it would have been, absolutely.
But it's only, you can only say that in retrospect, because nobody could have, I think nobody realized just how bad it would have been.
I think you have to put people through it first for people to start being willing to entertain the idea of losing, like putting their entire lives on pause fully for 2 full weeks.
Yeah. And then on the other side, though, if you actually do let that happen, and then you have to take precautions, then you also get to the other kind of burnout faster, where people are burnt out from taking precautions and don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Which is what we're seeing now.
Yeah. Seeing people being irresponsible because they are legally allowed to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
There we go. Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from, and I had to look at this, and I think I figured out.
Yeah.
So I think it's Ibali Derpface. Because there's Derpface, and I know Derpface, and then it's Ibali.
Right.
So that's my guess. As always, let us know in the comments if you want us to pronounce your name correctly next time. And they say, for anyone wondering, yes, this still works. This is talking about the challenge reset. It's a little scary, but damn, because of these guys, I've gotten so much more than I'd ever be able to. Longtime fan / subscriber. Keep at it, guys. It came from the All Working Glitch videos, which right now is your most recent video. And it won't be by the time this video comes up.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
This will supplant it.
And I always like to put in some complimentary comments, but that's not the reason why it's here.
We're full of ourselves.
We are.
Real narcissists.
It's that I believe this when we first found it, that the challenge reset video was probably maybe it wasn't the most powerful, but it was the most useful because it's been available for the longest time.
It was the single best glitch because it changes the game in a significant way without breaking the game in any way.
Yeah, because there were more powerful glitches where you could buy the most expensive pack for the lowest price, or you get multiple packs for the price of one.
Yeah.
And those were more powerful because you could get more stuff. Or when you could just get your multiplayer season rewards over and over again without actually completing another season.
Yeah, because those totally sort of destroy the economy of the game. But this one didn't destroy it, it just augmented it. It let you basically get those extra copies of a challenge character for cheaper. And
you could grind more efficiently because those fights gave you more credits. Mm-hmm. And it was more playing, not less. The other glitches that were more potentially powerful, where you could get more stuff, took you out of the games. You'd have to do a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with playing. And so you could get more resources, but you'd be doing stuff that had nothing to do with any of the actual joy of the game. Right? Mm-hmm. So I think, and we've seen it now, I mean, after all these years, I'd never imagined that the challenge reset would last that long in a different form. I mean, this is not the original challenge reset. Mm-hmm. But that is probably the single best glitch, and intentionally ambiguous, meaning when I say best, but I feel like it probably has been the most the best game glitch for Injustice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there we go. Our next comment comes from Nathaniel Yaish, and they say, so just to be sure, the Phantom Zone glitch only works on Android, right? By the way, I've been playing this game for a couple years and just now stumbled upon your channel. Great work, guys. Keep it going. And then the 100 emoji.
Yeah. So I guess the point of this is, and I guess if Nathaniel, it looks like it must be, it's not like an Anglo name. Yeah. And part of me, my mind wants to force it into
like Nathaniel.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's not right. I hope he or they or she, they come back and let us know. I'm always interested.
It could be Nathaniel.
Yeah. That we say this every time in our weekly video, but we can't attest to how effective it is. But there's an iOS challenge reset, and I'm pretty sure that it works the same way as far as resetting the Phantom Zone progress.
Yeah, but we don't know for sure.
Because
we can't test it.
So the short answer is the one that we do is only works for Android, but there might be another one that works for iOS. And if you look in the comments in the weekly recap, we've been cutting and pasting it ever since that comment showed up, so that people who want to take a bit of a chance are welcome to it. It's just not one of those things that we can endorse in the way that we could test it and say, yeah, it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There we go. Our next question comes from Leorio Paradinight. I probably got that second part wrong. The good part is I know I got the first name. Paradinight? Still not 100% sure. But anyways, this is extra funny because the only reason I definitely didn't get the first name wrong is because the start of this comment starts with, it's pronounced Leorio. So we know.
Lay like lay down and Oreo like the cookie.
Yeah. And they say, my reasoning for asking, this is the person who asked for our age previously, is very interesting. I was really just wondering. I knew from the beginning one was older, just from the voice. Gets you wondering exactly how much older. Someone asked before, and I was like, good question. And so I asked, lol. My guess is the son is 22 to 28, and for dad, 41 to 50. And then also, including Harley and Deadshot, should Tattoo Joker be on the team or Tux Joker? That's all. Happy Thanksgiving. So I like this comment. I like calling them Tattoo and Tux Joker.
I know.
Because their names are so similar.
Yes.
So, you have to distinguish them somehow.
It's like Pickle Suit Doomsday. Yeah. It's so much more descriptive.
And I will say, I think in the last video, so 22 to 28, you've overshot, but not by a ton. And I will say I would not be of legal drinking age in the US, but I am of legal drinking age in Canada. And I think that's what I said last time. So I'm between 19 and 21 and university undergrad aged.
Right. I think you've given enough context clues actually to narrow it down a lot more.
Yeah. If you look at when I started university, and the age at which the average person starts university, you could tell what my age is.
Right.
I think exactly. University fresh out of high school. But I guess that'll be a little sort of half Easter egg. I don't know. Yeah.
And the guess for me, I guess, is interesting. It's a pretty broad range. I'm not going to say any more than that. I think I'm not sure. I still have this sort of underlying unease about sharing too much detail. I think it's been beaten into my head a little bit about the potential for getting doxxed, and I don't even know that there's any value in knowing how old I am.
A fear from an earlier time.
So it's interesting, but the reason why I like this is because exactly what you said about Tattoo Joker and Tux Joker, because that is so perfect.
Because they're both Suicide Squad, right?
Yeah. So don't use Tattoo Joker. Tattoo Joker is awful if you want to fight with him on a team.
Yeah.
I think I feel like we've addressed this before, but maybe not on our Q&A, that Tattoo Joker, his passive makes him worse than not having a passive at all.
Yeah.
When you create a potential meat shield that has less health, no passive, and no gear effects. So they're weaker in every way, and so they're a less effective fighter than anybody with a real passive. But the fact that he's there, any value he has is as a meat shield. Chances are you're not going to be able to time it perfectly so that he knocks somebody out just when you need a meat shield.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's there, because there's no gear effects, he's going to have less damage output, less whatever thing you've geared him for. So the fight's just going to take longer.
Mm-hmm.
That's if you knock out somebody who's about equal power level. If you knock out somebody who's weaker, all it does is kill your time, because then you're just waiting for them to get knocked out while the other team builds up power, knocking you out. Or if they are more powerful than you, you know what? You're not going to be knocking them out.
Yeah.
Well, you might, but you have a hard time knocking them out at the right moment with Tattoo Joker. And the I love that name. And the advantage of potentially knocking somebody out that's that much more powerful than you, that where that difference would still hold without a passive and without any gear effects. The chance of that happening is probably highest in Survivor, where you get the benefit, but also it makes it much less likely that you're going to be able to knock them out specifically with Tattoo Joker.
So there we go.
So he's worse. I feel like he's worse than even Prison Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
No tattoo.
Our next question comes from Eddie15 or Eddie XV. I'm assuming they mean 15. I'm reading the Roman numerals, though I might be wrong. Those might just be supposed to be there as letters, but I doubt it. And they say, hey guys, it would be really interesting if you guys could show your setup and how you make your amazing videos. So, we appreciate it. Amazing might be a bit of an overstatement, and I think
hyperbole.
That'll become increasingly clear if we talk about our setup. So we can go through really quickly what we are working with, because it's really simple. We have a Blue Yeti mic. We have a computer with Windows Movie Maker installed. And then you do the footage recording. So you want to...
Yeah, so, originally we had a rooted Moto G... I think Moto G3.
Yeah.
And it was rooted so that we could use one of the screen recording apps that had the ability to record internal audio and shut off the mic.
Yeah.
Because then you wouldn't get all the background noise. You get the sound of the gameplay, and it would do these decent videos. However, the G3 started getting choking up a bit.
It was not good enough of a device to handle Injustice.
Yeah, as Injustice got more and more updates, the requirements for it got higher and higher. And so we had to switch to an LG G6. Now, because we're an Android 9, not Android 10, Android 10, apparently there's apps that give you the ability, again, without having to be rooted, to record onboard device audio while shutting down the mic. Android 9 does not. So then there was a transition there where the video quality got a lot better, but we lost the ability to do audio. So and actually I should probably comment originally, if somebody wants to go back and watch some of our older videos, what we actually did when we didn't even have...
We had a tripod and a camera that was pointed at a TV that we would just hook up, and we had tape on the ground for where we set the tripod up normally because it was a medium traffic area.
Yeah.
And then we had tape on the edges of the screen so that we could see where the edges of our monitor were.
Right, because there's a bezel. There's a black bezel.
Yeah.
It makes it hard to see where it starts.
And the ratio wasn't exactly right, so it would cut off a bit of the health bar at the top of our screen, and it was incredibly echoey, and it was not good audio. Because it was the onboard camera audio.
So what made that even harder, too, is that we'd have to play live while we were having the discussion.
Yeah.
So one of us had to pay enough attention to the game.
This is hard.
And still participate a little bit in the conversation, right? So I can't even remember when we did this, but then we made the transition to recording onboard game and then doing commentary about it after. And we liked it enough that when we started shifting to do more stuff that was just, us having a discussion about stuff.
If you were playing throughout this, it would be miserable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't. There's not enough. I mean, multitasking. I don't have enough RAM in my head. Multitasking is a lie. If anybody's claiming that somehow that they can do a bunch of things as well as they would have done if they'd done them individually, there's not enough brain capacity to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And besides, with the camera focused on the. All right. So the device was attached through the micro USB port to an HDMI cable to the TV. The camera was picking up the TV, but then because you're doing that, there's the effect called moire, where you get all these distorted kind of waves that go through.
When you're using
screen.
a digital camera that is viewing a digital screen, and when there's not an exact alignment of sort of the sensor to the pixels, it makes a pattern.
Yeah.
And you can see that when you take a picture of a monitor, and the easiest way to see that it's a digital artifact is when you zoom into the picture, a lot of times the moire will shift as you move the picture around.
Right.
So you can tell that it's a digital artifact because it doesn't stay consistent, even in a static picture that you've taken. If you zoom, it'll start looking different. It'll adopt different patterns.
Right.
Which is it's almost like an optical illusion for your camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't miss those days.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, yeah, but we have Movie Maker, we've got a screen recorder. What screen recorder software do you use?
Right now I'm using AZ Recorder. Originally we used SCR Recorder, which is the one that needed it worked on a regular device, but it needed a rooted device to get the audio part working.
Yeah. So,
and we didn't even always have a good microphone, right?
So that's all we use. You don't even need a blue mic. Honestly, if you were just starting out, if you buy any mic that is meant to be like an additional thing, anything that's not meant to like be a mic if your laptop doesn't already have one or whatever
like not built in. It's like it's like adding a card instead of relying on your motherboard.
Yeah, but most mics will make your audio better, and we use Audacity for recording our audio to put it on afterwards because Audacity lets you do really easy stuff
and it's free.
That makes it sound better. So if you look up if you look up room tone on Audacity, like how to remove background audio with room tone, Audacity has a really easy tool. So if there's a fan or if there's that sort of static hiss, you can get rid of a lot of that just for free, easily on Audacity. And you really don't need, for the type of stuff that we're making, it's a very low barrier to entry. I think almost anybody could use these tools and make it. And really, I think the only thing is having a device that's good enough for it. And like the only advantage that we'd have on anybody else in almost exactly the same position is potentially having a better mic than you do.
And Windows Movie Maker isn't available anymore after, I think, Windows 7.
Yeah, but like if you learn how to edit on anything, whatever you want to edit on is
there should be something free that's easy because this is really just
we're doing almost nothing with our editing, so anything would be good enough. And we were worried about not having enough to talk about here. Yeah, I was going to talk about Garfield Eats, but I guess we have to save that for next week too. And you know what? This will only take a second. James Liang said, at me spilling drink into my keyboard. Sounds like you need a keyboard cover. And I looked it up. It turns out, so the keyboard cover is something for MacBooks generally. Oh, that little like rubber keyboard cover.
Oh, so you can still type through it?
So you can type through it fully properly. Okay. I can't, there aren't really keyboard covers for mechanical keyboards, unfortunately. The update with that is that my keyboard is now unstickied. I went in there with a Q-tip and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on the end of it and cleaned it out enough times that eventually I moved all the sugared stuff out of it, so it's good. But unfortunately, can't keyboard cover a mechanical keyboard. I wish.
Yep, there you go.
Get it if I could. But there we go. So that is it for the video. We've got some people that we want to say things for.
Say things to?
First off, both, I guess. First off, a shout out to Eliza finally listening to these Caton. I'm planning on editing together all these clips that I've done for her so far for a Christmas present. Let's see if I actually follow through, but if so, then...
Wait, so are you saying she's going to listen to these?
Yeah, but I'll just edit together these little bits from the end.
The parts that... Oh!
Yeah, just as part of the shout out, because she doesn't know what this YouTube channel is. So, this shout out has been brought to you by a significant amount of time editing in Audacity. Audacity's good. At a future date.
Yeah, I can highly recommend it. If anybody's even thinking about doing stuff, Audacity is such a good tool.
We'll see if that actually comes together, because it'll take a very long time if I do it. Yeah, seems like a lot of work. Anyways, we'd also like to give a huge thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. So that is Consul Peasant and Edwoon, who are supporting us on the highest tier Last Word.
Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo, who support us on the credited level.
And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 241, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level. Thanks so much for your support. Thanks so much to all of you for however you support our videos. We'll see you next time. Komoda.